Welcome back to Best Books Ever. I am Tyler, as always, and today we are continuing our very exciting journey into Mistborn Final Empire. This is chapters 16 through 25. 16 through 25. We're part 3 of the book. Um, yeah, this is literally the middle of the book. I think this is also the meatiest part of the book. Um, and you can kind of see why. I feel like this definitely is the turning point for the story and kind of where some things happen that are definitely going to dictate the whole rest of the story. And kind of also like mentally where a lot of characters are at, how prepared these characters are for their roles. Um, yeah, and just how much they don't know, but also how many secrets and stuff they might not know from other people in the crew. So we'll get to that. But yeah, talk about that today. Okay, good stuff. So, as always, we like to start at the end. So, we have a nice little conversation with Kelsier and Menace. They give a lot more information than I think what happens on the surface. I think the point of their conversation at the end is to show that Menace was one of the people who actually chose to fight, right? Like the majority, 99% of Ska right now are not going to fight the Lord Ruler. It's not going to happen. They're not going to take part in any way, any shape against the Final Empire, right? It's been 1,000 years of just beating the Ska down. But there are some that are willing to fight, and I think from this conversation we see that Kelsier more resolutely, I think, wants to achieve this goal. There's a couple of reasons for that. I think one, up until this point, I think he's been super kind of hell bent on revenge for the Lord Ruler. But I feel like this conversation, it kind of turns a little bit, or a little special something gets added to it, where I think he finally is almost like believing in his own cause. It's like, no, I definitely, most of me definitely wants to get rid of the Lord Ruler permanently, but after seeing everything and like after trying, going through all these steps, all these preparations, it's been, I think, over 6 months. I think that's the last kind of time frame that we got from people. I think going through all of this, I think it has grown into actually wanting to have the rebellion happen. Instead of before, I think that it was a nice paycheck, and he saw this as a way to get to the Lord Ruler specifically. Everything else was just whatever happens, happens, right? But now I think it finally is like, no, I'm going to change this. This is not how it should be. We even have a little conversation between him and Ham, where Ham starts to question, not like really question, I don't think, but more so just again, one of his philosophical debates where he talks about how, who are we to say that the Lord Ruler is wrong? Like, isn't he God, or at least a sliver of God? And doesn't God decide what is right and wrong? So what's going against him doesn't make us wrong. There's also another conversation that he has with someone. I think it's Pam as well. But just kind of talking about how there are seems to be actual physical differences between Ska and the nobility, because it's kind of what they wanted to teach them, right? To push the Ska down, to bring the nobility up. Certain differences, right? Like the Ska being smaller, the Ska being able to reproduce, it seems a lot quickly and a lot just more than the nobility. The Ska obviously not being able to have elementic powers where the nobility can. There's these little things that, like, Kelsier wants to combat, because he's like, no, like, this is not how it should be. This is not good. We should not just live like this. We can't just accept this. And there's the other side of it where it's like, well, that's kind of how it is. And again, who are we to say that this is wrong? I mean, again, most of us reading this, I assume, are like, well, no, Kelsier is right. Like Ham might make some good points, and you don't necessarily think Ham thinks these things. It's just, fun to think about, right? It's kind of interesting, fascinating, but it just make you question a little bit. Again, I like that we're getting, with Sazed, translating that journal might not be as helpful, or maybe as helpful in the way that they initially thought, but I do like that we're learning more about the Lord Ruler, because that, I think, is a big question. That's a big point that is becoming dependent on like their purpose, and like, again, if they should really be doing this. We all know how we feel about the Lord Ruler now, but what was he before, and like, does he actually deserve this? Everyone talks about him defeating the deepness. It's like, well, what was the deepness? What exactly happened there? So a lot of questions there. But again, I do like that they're bringing more and more of the Lord Ruler's backstory into this. And then, even Vin. Vin has a lot of that doubt as well. She's softened for many reasons towards the nobility. Some of it, I think, is just their brainwashing, but some of it, I think, is valid. So yeah, a lot of questions, a lot of like murking the waters a little bit, which I think is also a direct, variable in Kelsier becoming who he is now versus just how he was at the beginning of the book. Vin has already noticed him changing. And so for him to become this person that he is now, it's like, yeah, we are kind of contributing to how he's acting and how he's thinking. That's another thing I wanted to get into, which is like the whole crew talking about how they are concerned for Kelsier. Kelsier's always been, big ego, all eyes on him, but now it seems like he's becoming more. Like he's spreading these rumors about the survivor of Hassan. He's got the 11th medal stuff. He's seemingly the leader of the rebellion. Too many things are kind of aligning to, I forget who it is, but one of the crew members that Vin is talking to mentions that, he's almost becoming a holy man. He's almost becoming a prophet. I think Kelsier even uses the word to describe himself once or twice. He describes himself as a prophet, and it's like, is that who he actually should be becoming? Is this good for the cause? Is it selfish? What is the end goal for that? I do remember in part, I don't know, last part maybe, he's talking to Sazed, and it's gotta be part 2 then. He's talking to Sazed, and they're doing the whole thing where Sazed is like, oh, here's a religion, and Kelsier asks, are there any religions about eliminating or even killing the nobility? And Sazed is like, oh no, I don't really think there is. No, there's really nothing quite like that. And then Kelsier's like, oh, I should start a religion based on that. It's kind of like an offhand comment. Again, just kind of playing into his hatred for the nobility. And then also, at that point, Sazed was still very, very new. So we're kind of learning more about his interests and kind of how he and Kelsier sort of interact with each other. But now we're getting to this part, and it's like, it's happening. Like people are like whispering about him, and like Vin is listening in on the soldiers like talk about him, like, oh, that's him. He's got the scars. Him always showing off his allomantic stuff to people, to Ska that have never seen him before. Him eventually like almost leading them to believe that he can grant his powers to other people. It's like he's almost starting to play God, he's almost starting to like directly oppose the Lord Ruler, and I'm sure that's what he wants. I think at the end of the day, as careful and conniving as they all are, I think Kelsier sees an opportunity to maybe like make himself bigger than life and force the Lord Ruler to come out of hiding, right? And be like, there's never been someone like this before that this guy actually believed in. Again, maybe at the very beginning when, the Lord Ruler was still new and still trying to stamp the fires of their passion and the religion and all that stuff. But hundreds of years. I mean, they even talk about the last Ska rebellion. I think was like 200 years ago, 300 years ago, like something crazy. So we'll see. We'll see about that. Let's see. I guess there's lots of ways we can go with this. So we'll stick with Kelsier. I only have one more thing, sort of, with Kelsier. We do see more backstory. We have Mare, right? His wife, I guess, right? A little tidbit of information I thought was cool was he says that Mare actually gave him an ATM geode. She gave him the impression that she found two that week. It's like, oh, you can take one. We'll both have one. We'll be able to survive another week. And it turns out that she did not have another one. She only had that one. So I don't know. It just kind of complicates her character, their relationship, where Kelsier still loves her, still is able to, but even that sacrifice is conflicting in his mind, where he's like, was that out of love? Was that out of guilt? It's very tough. So again, like, these little tidbits of Mare, I think whenever we do hear more of Kelsier's backstory, I'm able to, see a clearer picture of who he is and his, what drives him. I think that's really interesting. Yeah. So more Mare. I guess the rest really moves on to Vin for the most part. I guess one small thing before we get to the Vin stuff is Sazed. This part we actually do learn more about the Feruchemy stuff. We learn he's not an allomancer. He performs Feruchemy, which is, instead of burning metals, he is able to like wear metals, like bracelets or earrings, and he can store powers. It doesn't seem to be the same powers though. It's not like one for one with allomancy, where yes, he can store strength and like speed, which is similar to pewter, I imagine. But you can also store like other traits like eyesight. And the most important one that he can store is knowledge and memories. That's a big one. I mean, for him specifically with religion, but then also like the whole terrorist people stuff, right? Where it's like their whole purpose is to, find information about the terrorist religion, mixed with the whole like near genocide of the terrorist people. Being able to store memories and knowledge is important, so that if that ever were to happen again, they have some people, hopefully, they do their best like they've done so far to keep some people safe, with that knowledge stored. That way they can, if they ever need to rebuild or something, they can be like, oh, we have it all, Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. He doesn't give everything away, Vin deduces a couple things, but he does not give everything away to her because, it's not that he doesn't trust her. It's just that he doesn't tell anyone everything. I mean, maybe Kelsier knows the most, but even, Kelsier, I'm sure, doesn't know everything, because it is like a very sacred secret to all the terrorist people. But yeah, I thought that was cool. I mean, not only, showing a little more interaction between Vin and Sazed besides the whole like training Valette stuff, but also, more about the terrorist people. Again, like we've only seen a couple other terrorist people, and they've been super brief and pretty much exactly what they're described as. They're like the perfect servant. So to see more from like his perspective is interesting. Yeah. Cool. And it also obviously explains why he was able to save her last time. And then we get into a bunch of Vin related things. So let's see. One little piece of information that I think is important. Now again, we're already probably like 10 to 15 minutes into this episode, but I've read these books before, as you should know, unless this is your first part, which is weird. We're starting in the middle, I guess. No future spoilers though. But one thing I did want, I did kind of see, read, as one does to books. Um, I don't know. I just want to take note of it. So they pointed out that there was 3 Inquisitors that were after Vin and Kelsier at Creditshaw, right? 2 of them were sent after Vin, and only 1 of them was sent after Kelsier. Now that, maybe just a throwaway line, doesn't mean anything, possibly, but sometimes you like to look into things way more than you need to, right? So my whole thing with that is, why? Why did they send 2 out? Like, Vin is much smaller in stature. She's far less experienced in allomancy. I don't know. It's just very strange, unless they made a mistake or something. But like that doesn't make any sense either. Like, did the Lord Ruler send 2 after her? Like, I don't know. There's these questions with that. Again, it might have just been a throwaway line, something that just happened, and that's it. Like, you just take it at face value. There's no deeper meaning to it. But for me, I'm just like, why did they send 2? Like, is it because they thought Vin was more dangerous? And while we have seen little tidbits here and there of like Vin being very a quick learner, right? Even in this part, there's again a very small thing where her and Kelsier were in the caves looking for the remaining soldiers, and there was a moment where she was able to see some people in a very dark, distant corner, and Kelsier in his mind thought, how was she able to see them from this far away? Because, insinuating that he did not see them, and they both have allomancy, they're both using tin, so again, she's a quick learner. She picks up on things. She does have a natural ability for it. Like when she was healing, her body already knew how to instinctually, burn metals. She, when she was talking to Marsh, she was able to pick up on pulses. Again, she couldn't specifically identify each one. And Marsh made a nice joke there where he was like, "Good." He was like secretly glad that she wasn't able to do that already, because it took him 6 months to do it. He would have been very jealous. But even with that, it's like, let's say there is something special about Vin, right? That she is just super, just like naturally gifted, with allomancy. 2 Inquisitors? like even with that, it's like, that doesn't make any sense to me, So again, I just wanted to overthink it a little bit, but also maybe bring it up just for anyone out there that didn't catch that, and now you all can look way too far into it. It probably means nothing, but another small thing with Vin that I wanted to point out was Vin having a very mild identity crisis. Not one that I think is of any concern, but I did want to point it out because I found it fascinating for where she began to where she is now. There's lots of points to be made there, but with the identity crisis thing, her eventually joining the crew and then becoming Lady Valette, right? We see how powerful it is for her to be able to just say, oh, well, Lady Valette's not me, like I'm Vin. I can put on the makeup, the dress, all that stuff, and that's what the nobility will look at. They won't look at me. This is just another disguise, right? It's just another job on a thieving crew. But now it's forming a little more, and it's like, she's almost questioning, like, who is the real her, because then she even goes out, with Ham to the garrison, and she even thinks of her clothing there, which is pretty much how she would dress, maybe even a little nicer version of it, but that's how she would dress, like all the ash on her face, the trousers, all that stuff. Even that she looks at as another disguise, so like that, that little like street urchin side of her, she's like, oh, that's not really me either though. Like it was, but it's not anymore. It's not who I am. And so, just like a little bit of like, who am I? Who is Vin really? I'm not the noble woman. That's not the true me. I'm not the street urchin. That's not the true me. Who am I? And I like, was it this part or was it last part? I don't remember, but and one of the parts where she's also sort of thinking about this in her head, she says, I'm not this, I'm not that. I'm I'm Mistborn. And it's like, oh, that's a very interesting way to look at it. Because that doesn't really mean anything, but for her, that is truly who she identifies as. Like she is a Mistborn, not only that word and that term, but her being a Mistborn has led her to where she is today. Like if she was just a misting, probably almost for sure would not have got the attention of Marsh, therefore the attention of Kelsier. So that has sort of led her to being the noble woman and the fake street urchin and the Kelsier's crew member and all that stuff. So, yeah. I thought that was a nice little internal conflict that she has. Yeah. And then, another thing that Vin sees, that Vin witnesses, and it kind of goes back to a point that I was discussing earlier about, Kelsier and where he's at now, and all the little pieces of like possible doubt, the like little things to think about that when you're in his position you're really not supposed to think about. Again, like bring up the points of, is the Lord Ruler bad? Is going against him like objectively wrong because of who he is and his title? Are the Ska like biologically lesser than nobility? And then does that give the nobility the right to rule over the Ska? All these little things, of course, Kelsier is not supposed to think about. Like, he doesn't want to hear these things. One, doesn't want to hear about them emotionally because that is not how he feels. But then two, like, he's leading a rebellion on the basis that these things are wrong. These things need to be changed fundamentally. So kind of following that thread, we have the moment where Vin witnesses a guard slaughter a Ska right outside the manor that the ball is happening, right? No one bats an eye, no one says anything, no one makes like a scene out of it or anything. It just kind of happens. I think that's a very quick but important moment because there's a lot of struggle internally with Vin, with a lot of things apparently. But with this is like, again, she's being pulled in many different directions. She is the ball, so she does talk to these people. And so she feels like, they can be mean, they can be cunning, all that stuff. But are they monsters? There's no way. There's no way these, like look at them. There's no way these people are monsters. And then she, specifically thinks of Elend, and she's like, no, I can't be Elend. Elend would never. But then she witnesses this act and how nonchalant everyone is about it. And it's like, oh, these people don't care. I think it's very important to point out that to me, that doesn't necessarily make them like every single person that has noble blood. I don't think that makes all of those people monsters, but I do think at the very least, like, not caring isn't a positive, because then we get to Elend, which we'll talk more about in a second, who seems to actively care. And we could be wrong. Kelsier's warned Vin that, Elend he likes to rebel against his father. And then he's just like all other nobility, where they get together and they talk about these things, but it's really just to make alliances and all that. But on the off chance that Elend is actually passionate about it, and I feel like as the reader, you're supposed to feel like he is, from Vin's perspective, like we hear the things not only that he says, but how he says them. It doesn't seem like just a front. And also, if he says these things to other people for alliances, why would he say them to Vin? Like Lady Valette, no real reason, no like huge reason to uh, ally yourself with her house. Her house is a pretty small house. Um, Again, not powerful, not like any glaring advantages to it. Another ally is another ally, and she doesn't seem to have any. The Renew house doesn't seem to have any enemies, so I guess nothing really hurts from from allying with her with the Renew house. But you know, so just another reason as to like if he was putting on a front, why would he need to do that in front of Lady Valette, right? So yeah, again, that kind of internal struggle of like, how do I feel about these people? Is it fair to just make blanket statements? Is it case by case? And then how do I deal with this being involved in the mission that I am, right? And then I guess really two more big things. One, something I did want to see more of, and I mentioned this before, of Vin getting more specialized training with all the different crew members. So I already mentioned kind of Marsh and doing the whole like Seeker stuff. I really liked these parts because this is what I wanted it to be. This is what I hoped for it to be, right? We already saw it with Breeze, where the whole point of it is to say, Mistborn are amazing, incredibly powerful. They have obviously they have all the powers, and so it is an understatement to say you want Mistborn on your team. However, Mistborn have all the powers, which means that they cannot put all of their energy into every single one. It's mathematically impossible. But a Misting who only has one power lives their whole life training and leveling up, using like video game terms, leveling up their one ability. So we already saw with Breeze, where it's like, oh, Breeze is good. Breeze is way better at soothing than Kelsier is. And that's not a knock against Kelsier, it's just because this is all Breeze has. So he's going to be really good at it because he does it exclusively. So then we get to Marsh, and Marsh is like, no. Everyone walks around here thinks that seeking is worthless because, if I have a Mistborn, they're just gonna burn copper. I think I was getting confused about which metals do what. I'm just gonna use my smoking ability, and they won't ever know. But then he kind of schools her, and he's like, well, no, like you can. I mean, first off, you're not always going to fight a Mistborn. Like, you assuming that means that you are underestimating Mistings. Like, Mistings can kill you too. Like, you don't have to always go into every situation trying to figure out how to fight a Mistborn, because then you'll be focusing on that, and then a simple steel push. Someone will steel push a coin through your forehead and you'll be dead, because you're focusing too much on like how to combat everything. So then with that, it's like, well, if you fight a bunch of them, you don't have to worry about smokers. And then being able to know, really getting like super specific with how you're able to focus your seeking ability. Like you can get to the point where you can not only hear the pulses, or I guess like feel them. You can feel how each one is distinct and unique, and you can even tell which ability they have without seeing someone push a coin. If you are able to feel their pulse and feel it as steel, that they're burning steel, then you'll know, and you'll have an advantage over them. And then also with the whole smoking thing, he was like, um, you already think like a Mistborn. Mistborn immediately think that they should be smoking 100% of the time. And it's like, yeah, but then you won't know what's coming. Because, it also clouds you, right? So like, a big thing there is that it stops anyone from pulling or pushing on your emotions. And it's like, yeah, but wouldn't you rather leave an open door and let them push or pull your emotions to know exactly which ones they're trying to push or pull, so you can gain that intel and know what they're trying to get out of you. So again, there's a lot of just little points that he makes that are very, very astute, right? And then we even go to Ham for a little bit, and we don't actually, we're not able to see him spar, not able to put his wisdom into practice, but he does talk about, like, again, a lot of people who can burn pewter just think that you just use it all the time. Some people even flare it much more than they're supposed to, and he's like, no, 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 use it subtly, because there's lots of points, right? Like, he was like, oh, if you flare it and you're not able to dish the killing blow, well, now your opponent knows what your limits are, and they're going to be able to fight you much more effectively. Um, you never want to punch at your full strength unless it is the end of the fight, which means you are winning the fight. um, and also, like, burning it you can get reliant on it. Um, you can also get lazy. Burn it at the right moments, and yeah, yeah. So yeah, very, very. Again, that is kind of what I wanted all this to be. It was like, hey, let's get really specific with all these powers, because again, Vin has kind of stumbled into a treasure trove of knowledge. All these people, again, maybe not a person specifically for each of her allomantic powers, um, but pretty close. And so, like, she can learn from presumably some of the best at what they do, and maybe even able to harness that. Again, probably not get as good at any of them as any of the other people, but as good as a Mistborn can possibly get at each individual ability. So yeah, very cool there. And then the last thing, Vin and Elend, right? I think that dominated a pretty good chunk of this part, and I think there's a good reason for it, right? One, I think generally you just love to see it, and at least I do, the whole, like, romance aspect. Um, Love it, right? Just blanket statement. It is very cute how it's like, oh, because Vin's very unsure of herself, but then you can see that Elend is kind of the same. Elend is a little older than her, so I guess, a little more maturity there, but, them even setting up the whole, like, spook, giving Vin a handkerchief, and being like, oh, it's because he wants to court you. And then later on, Elend giving it, and then Vin now knowing what it means, and so she tries to respond accordingly. She's like, oh, well, you don't, here, let me give you this back, because in her mind, she doesn't want, one, she has the knowledge now, so she knows what it means. And then two, she's like, oh, well, I don't want anyone to think. And then Elend is like, you should keep it. It wasn't just for practical use. And Vin's like, oh, oh my. So that was good. But yeah, and then I kind of mentioned earlier, but, like, just their passion, and again, we see everything from Vin's eyes. So to hear everything that Elend is saying about how he wants change, him kind of speaking out against the Lord Ruler almost, him seemingly having some budding, concern and empathy for this guy. And then just kind of roll into, like, all the books that were read. We did see a lot of, like, political stuff. His, like, secret meetings with other heirs to other houses. If he's serious about this, and he's legit, he might actually want to make change. Like, we can be the change that we want to make. Like, our fathers and whoever, like, they're not gonna live forever. We'll be the next ones up. Then we'll be in charge, and we can do whatever we want. So that's cool. And then even again more on the Vin and Elend specific stuff. Her finally able to talk to him, and the first thing she does when they talk to each other in person is she starts crying, and Elend's like, "Oh my God, what's wrong?" And Vin's like touches her face, like, "What? Why am I crying?" But yeah, just like everything was very emotional for her, just like frustrating, and she realized that she actually did miss him, and just like it was a very powerful moment, I think. Um, but yeah, them just seemingly having more and more trust in each other. It is interesting because I think this time, I think she does have a conversation with Kelsier about like wanting to, maybe we can use him as an ally, and Kelsier obviously doesn't want that. Like, one, he's like, you poor child, he's he's got you. But then two, it's like, well, no, he's nobility. I promise I won't kill him, but we're not bringing him in. That's insane. Um, but yeah, it's just like I don't know. I mean, I guess I do know technically if that will or will not happen. Um, but like reading it now, it's like I don't know if that would be possible. I mean, having real nobility on your side, I think would be great. Aside from the fake real nobility and renew. But then also it's like, how far is it? Like, again, how authentic is Elend? Does he really just want to rebel? Does he just have these grandiose ideas because he's young? You know, just like maybe many other leaders have had ideas of like restructuring things when they are in charge, and then they get in charge and they're like, well, that's too difficult, and I already have all the power, so who cares? Um, so yeah, stuff to think about there. And yeah, and that's pretty much it. That's everything that happened. Um, Again, I started with the end, but I'm gonna end with the end as well. Um, they're kind of distraught. The whole uh, Yedin leading the majority of their troops to their death. I mean, it sucks now because now they set them back super far, and there is even the question of, do they have to do this anymore? I mean, Yedin was paying them. This was a job. Like presumably from Kelsier's thoughts at the very end of this part, I think Kelsier wants to do it anyway. Especially again if he now releases his like newfound desire to see the rebellion, he still is clinging on to the desire to kill the Lord Ruler. But then everyone else, it's like, is Breeze gonna still want to do this? Is Ham? All these. I mean, there is still the idea of, well, Yedin isn't gonna pay us anything, but I mean, we didn't really care about that anyway because we were gonna get like half or whatever of the ATM store, so that's gonna pay for itself. So it's like, I don't know, how does this change things? And even if they decide to go through with it, still, I'm pretty sure it was 7 of their 9,000 troops are now gone. They have 2,000 troops. That is not enough for what they have to do. They already weren't going to be able to defeat the garrison, but now are they going to have enough to even hold anything? I don't know. That's tough. But yeah, so that's kind of the cliffhanger we're left on right now. Um, yeah, that is it. Very, very eventful part. A lot of things, a lot of moving pieces. Having a good time. So next week, um, gonna throw a little wrench in it. Normally, I would just say, "Oh, let's do part 4," but why don't we do the last two parts? Why don't we just finish the book? There's 2 more parts in the book, part 4 and 5. I was gonna split them up, but it's like, one of the parts is kind of short, and I kind of wanted to fit everything into a month or 4 weeks. So next week would be the 4th week. So it's like, hey, why don't we just finish it? We have a big meaty last part. There'll be a lot of stuff to talk about because it'll literally be the end of the book, and it'll be a much, not much more, but more pages than we've read so far in a week. So why don't we just do that? So that's what we're doing. Parts 4 and 5. Just finish the book basically. And yeah, we'll see how this first book ends. Not the end of the story, obviously. We still have 2 two more books after this, but the end of a book. We'll see how this ends. Where how far does this go, right? Um, yeah, that is it. Hope y'all enjoying the book so far, and see you next week. I guess. Have fun reading.